This is a Sandy Boy Productions podcast.
Welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast, where we help women remove the overwhelm of living their most holistic life. This is the place to find evidence-based nutrition tactics, healthy lifestyle and wellness tips, abundance mindset, and easily implementable low-tox living strategies so you can rise up to your full potential and protect your family's health. I'm your host, Stacey Heine, certified holistic nutritionist and better living advocate. Now, let's get empowered with some simple swaps that make a big impact for optimal wellness. Welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast. It is episode 19 today, and I am so excited for you to hear from the dynamic duo, James and Dahlia Marin, who are co-founders of Marin to Health and the first 100% plant-based SIBO and IBS nutrition program. Marin to Health is an integrative dietetic practice which brings together the best in medical nutrition therapy to bridge the gaps in health maintenance, disease prevention, and disease reversal when possible. Their mission is to prevent, treat, and reverse disease, combining integrative techniques like whole food plant-based nutrition, Eastern modalities, and Western techniques to promote an optimal healthy lifestyle using the best of everything that they have at their disposal. So in today's episode, we talk so much about the gut, but we also talk about both James and Dahlia's journeys of health and how they are where they are today and why they teach what they teach today. And we also talk about the environment, environmental toxins, plastics, again, gut health, different gut issues that people can experience, how James and Dahlia both view the gut microbiome and digestion. I love the way that they explain things. You're gonna love it too. It's like a river flowing through. So I can't wait for you to hear that. We also touch on probiotics and recommendations for stress reduction, and we also talk about hypothyroidism. So if any of this interests you, I know you're gonna be very much in love with today's episode. Just like I am, you are going to be in for a treat with James and Dahlia Marin of Marin to Health. I hope that you enjoy. Okay, James and Dahlia, thank you so much for being here today. I am thrilled to be in your presence.
Thank you. Likewise. Yeah.
Oh, you guys jinxed. That was amazing. Okay, so just for fun, to kick this conversation off, I want to know from each of you, what is your current favorite recipe?
Ooh.
I know, it's hard.
That is.
I am all down for a really yummy curry all the time. It just, all the warming spices, the different possibilities with veggies and legumes you can put in there. I love, love, love curry. And it reminds me of like Mediterranean food that I grew up eating.
Yum.
Yeah. I think lately I've been really obsessed. Like I just had this morning a bowl, like so a smoothie bowl where it's really like thick and whipped and it's almost like ice cream. And I just get to add all my greens and I get to add all these yummy organic fruits and veggies. And it's just so easy. And then you put a little like walnuts and chia so you get a little crunch. I've just been really into that lately. So that's like I think it's simple. It adds a lot in one simple recipe. So I'm really into that. There's so many to choose from. I'm a foodie. I can eat anything and everything.
No, and it's hard because as a foodie, like we tend to find favorites and we'll stick to them for like a good while, but then we'll be like, okay, let's mix it up, and we'll find like new amazing recipes. So that's why I said current favorite, because I know that it changes a lot. So, okay. I know that you are both registered dietitians, and as a plant-based nutritionist myself with a plant-based family, it was super epic to come across you guys and another married couple with a young kiddo who live this way. And thankfully, Instagram has opened up a huge door to the plant-based professional community. And it's so good to find other people that are spreading quality information on how to get well with plants. And so before we get into all of the questions, I want to know from both of you, what is your health journey? And did your health journey help you decide to put more plants on your plate? Or how did it all unfold for each of you?
Yes.
I'll let Dahlia go first.
I love this. And I love talking about my own health story because I always tell people I was my own first patient. And really, my own health journey is what led me to becoming a plant-based dietitian, a plant-based mom, and has really motivated me further in remaining plant-based and raising our daughter plant-based. I grew up, I was first generation American. So I grew up with a very acculturated diet of heavy processed food with a little bit of Mediterranean food mixed in there. But I grew up to typically that picky eater, right? I was like, oh, no, I'll just eat the pita bread and, all the carbs. And saw myself and my health changing little by little as I grew up. I became an overweight, then an obese teenager. I lacked energy, that vitality that I saw others around me have. And everyone just thought I was a lazy teen until one day I went to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. I was having some ear hearing things. And he quickly pointed out that I had a large goiter. So my thyroid was enlarged and swollen. He referred me to an endocrinologist, and thankfully I was referred to an amazing endocrinologist, and he did comprehensive testing for me and revealed that in one single day I was diagnosed with an autoimmune thyroid condition, Hashimoto's. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, prediabetes, high cholesterol, and this, I was given 3 prescriptions. And this to me at 17 years old was a sentence that I did not want to have. I looked around me, I saw other family members, acquaintances, friends who had their polypharmacy, their multiple prescriptions they were taking. And I just knew that this was not going to be my destiny. But I gave it a try. I went home, I took my medication. I felt somehow worse. And you're not already feeling good when you have all those things going on, but I somehow felt worse. So I was determined. I said, I'm determined to turn things around. I want to work with my care team and I want to get off of these medications. And so in the past 15 years, I have since reversed any sign of prediabetes. I had a healthy pregnancy, no gestational diabetes, no longer have PCOS. I no longer have high cholesterol. I have lost and kept off about 60 pounds. And I will always have my autoimmune thyroid disease because the attack happened at just such a high rate. So I will always take thyroid medication, but I require about 5% of the amount that I used to take. So that was my health journey. I then just took a nutrition class for my own interest, loved it, and decided to pursue dietetics and nutrition as a profession.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, James.
That's a good one. I'm not as in-depth or interesting, but I grew up, I'm 3rd generation here. So my family was fully acculturated and we were on the standard American diet. I grew up eating sugary cereal and Pop-Tarts were norm and just all the junky processed foods you can think of. And every once in a while we had some canned vegetables and some fruits and things like that. But, quickly enough, I became morbidly obese as a child. And that kind of stigma has always stuck with me. I think it'll always be with me. But, you have that kind of emotional trauma. And looking back, even as we continue to progress through our health journey, which is even beyond nutrition, it goes into mental and emotional and spiritual. I grew up in a very traumatic household. So I think I used food as a way to cope with that. So very abusive father and that dynamic. And, as many of us have, or many of us experience these traumas. So using food as that comfort. Food was my friend. Food was there when I was sad. Food was there when I was happy. Food was always there. And I remember coming home with a bag of chips and a big thing of soda and just stuffing my face in front of the TV. So developed joint pain, asthma, severe allergies. That's as severe as I got, thankfully, with some chronic disease. And at one point I was like, you know what, I just have to start exercising. I cannot keep doing this. This was around maybe like junior high going into high school. And started exercising. And I was like, oh, wow, I feel so much better. My joint pain is going away. My asthma is even going away. And then looking more, I was like, I want to do this. I want to be a physical therapist. I really want to help people exercise. But as I went down that path, I realized, oh, wow, what am I eating? What is this thing called nutrition? What is in the food I'm eating? And I started talking to people more about nutrition than exercise. So I shifted kind of more with a nutrition focus and went that route and found out, oh, you could be a registered dietitian. What is that? What is dietetics? And that's kind of where Dahlia and I met and just kind of continued our journey from there. But it is one of realizing the power of what all of us do every day, which is eat and consume these amazing and healing foods. And we really are interested in that.
Wow, you guys are amazing. And James, your story, I mean, gosh, that it is just like Dahlia's, just as important as Dahlia's. I mean, like we all have our story, and it's so potent to how we live our life today. And until you take that time to go back and reflect on your story, like it doesn't, you don't really realize why you make the choices, or maybe why you have the habits that you do on a daily basis. So super important
to our kids too, because if you're able to recognize those habits, break those habits, they get passed down generationally. And so we just knew we wanted to be the breakers of those cycles. Yes. And so we are so grateful to have each other to really learn and grow together, and the resources and the community that we have to break free and break through that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that so much. So community probably has to do a little bit with what I want to ask you about, James, right now. What does it mean to be an environmental nutritionist?
Yeah. So, I mean, really that gets to what I was saying is, you start with these little changes, right? You start on the inside and you quickly start to move outside. So we have this kind of concept of like a rock being thrown into a lake and it ripples out. So maybe you start this journey of like, I want to lose weight. I think that's a lot of people like, I want to lose weight. It usually starts there. It starts with me. But quickly, when you start to reflect inward, you realize, oh, wow, I do have hypertension, or I have gut dysbiosis, and my microbiome isn't strong. And you start to peel back these layers. And then when you finish with yourself, you start to look a little outwards in your family and your home. And so it really, environmental nutrition speaks to that environment and how your food and what you eat and your nutrients interact with your environment. So for the most part, this consists heavily of environmental toxins. So many of us are not aware there's 80 to now even 100,000 plus synthetic chemicals that have been marketed in the United States alone, and they're untested. So these are flame retardants. These are, if you think of, just look around your room, the plastics we have, the paint, the plasticizers, the drywall, these are dioxins, PCBs, PBDEs, all these wonderful scientific names, right? And what we always ask our patients is, look, you're exposed to this on a daily basis. So what if instead of these invisible exposures, we took a glass of water and you saw us putting these exposures in these glass of water, a little diesel fuel, little flame retardants, little dioxins. And by the way, 95% of our dioxin exposure comes from animal products. So this is mainly one of the big reasons why we went more towards plants, right? But throw a little bit of that in there, some pesticides. Who out of any of us listening or watching or hearing this would actually drink that water at the end of the day? I bet none of us would. But since we don't see it, since it's not right in front of us like that, we just don't think about it, or we don't think about it as it contributes to our chronic disease. So we are bringing that awareness. And this is why our practice and what we do is more integrative. It does take a integrative and holistic approach because we work on those layers, right? Maybe not all in the first visit. We're not like, okay, hey, we're going to talk about everything, right? But we get to that as you progress. And that is you getting stronger and you building to that level.
Yeah. And it is a level, like it's a level, a whole new level of life. It's like a shift that you take when you learn about all of that stuff. That is amazing that you guys teach about that. So let's go a little bit more into that. Can you talk about environmental toxins and, what we're bringing into our home and how maybe they might affect our gut microbiome and our genetics?
Totally. And so Simply put, I mean, a great analogy for this is we think of your GI tract like a river. So from mouth to anus, you have this amazing life-giving river. Just like any river and any ecosystem is a giver of life. Not only are you providing life to what's inside the river, but it's everything around you. And so a lot of our rivers are polluted. So you see tires in there, someone's dumping oil in there. There's muck and dirt in our river. So really it's about assessing. I don't want to, like we don't want to just be at the end of the river saying we need to filter your river water, right? That's kind of the analogy for lots of medications, but also lots of supplements and lots of these gimmicks out there, right? You need a detox. You need to take this supplement kit. No, you need to take these 15 supplements or these 15 medications. That's like someone being at the end of your polluted river going, okay, let's filter this water. Instead, what we challenge every single person to do is let's assess your river. Let's walk this river together. Let's remove these tires together. Let's remove the trash together. Hey, that guy who's dumping oil in your river, or maybe it's your own self polluting your own river, let's stop doing those habits and figure out why you started doing those habits, right? So it's really looking at this as a big picture and saying, let's remove these high risk habits that we're doing. And what are some of those habits? It can be very obvious, right? Like smoking and alcohol and things like that. We know those are toxins going into the body. Processed foods, which then we start to kind of get to maybe habits that people don't really think about, like these processed foods, like taking your shoes off before you go into your home, like using a water filter instead of buying bottled water, right? Like trying to avoid plastic wrapping, wherever you can, whether it's food containers or in the grocery store. So then it's little things that people really aren't aware of because we're not really aware that there's plastic nanoparticles. We think of BPA. I think a lot of us know about BPA. We think like, oh, it's this big molecule. No, we're talking about nanoparticles, right? So anything touching plastic is leaching these nanoparticles. And these are endocrine disrupting chemicals. We call them EDCs. And that can speak to where Dahlia, at 17 years old, being diagnosed with pre-diabetes and PCOS, and even her Hashimoto's hypothyroid, those are endocrine diseases. And I'm sure you and many of those listening have been diagnosed with some type of endocrine-related chronic disease. And we're seeing that on the rise because of these chemicals. So it's insane.
And I think people are more aware of them nowadays where, social media, we're able to spread these messages. And I think more people are kind of hip to the fact that these things are out there, but they're still on the rise. I think as we're becoming more efficient in spreading information, companies are also becoming more efficient in making junk for the environment. The percentage of microplastics that are being found in fish doubled over, just the last less than 10 years. So we're continuing to see this on the rise. And as we do so, we will continue to see disease on the rise. We know that our children's generation, the three of us, we all have small children, they will likely, if we continue on this path, become more and more diseased. They estimated that children born after the year 2000s will be the first generation in hundreds of years to not outlive their parents. And with our increase in technology, this boom in technology, we've almost had a renaissance in technology and information that we can share. To me, that is shocking. And to me, that says we need to do more. We need to dig deeper. We need to really reflect upon all of these little occurrences that we all might have on a daily basis that not only we are being exposed to, our children are being exposed to. And myself as a mother, that was something we really looked at when I was pregnant, breastfeeding. We know you're going to pass things on to baby. Babies are born also with all of these different chemicals James was speaking of in their umbilical cords. So even before we're emerging into the world, we're being exposed.
So, and I just have to, since you brought that up, so there's this transgenerational exposure as well. So for those listening, that's like, a lot of our patients feel like, oh my gosh, it's all my fault. They have this guilt, right? And that also kind of builds onto their emotional trauma of like, oh my gosh, I destroyed my microbiome, or I didn't breastfeed my kids, or I didn't do this, I didn't do that. it's not all your fault. There's even transgenerational exposure where your grandmother could have been exposed to something which led you to have IBD or some type of disease, right? Where it just kind of that exposure even your grandmother had puts a little chink in your armor, puts, just kind of hits that weak link you already maybe have in your genetics and just really exposes it. And something I love to point out with my patients is, think about it. When your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, you were there. When it comes to females, 50% of your genetic exposure was there when your grandmother was pregnant with your mom. And what I'm talking about is the eggs. All women are born with all the eggs they will ever have. You were one of those eggs, right? So if your grandmother smoked, if your grandmother was drinking alcohol, if your grandmother was exposed to pesticides, that can affect 50% of your DNA just right then and there. So It's really, really interesting stuff.
It's crazy. And so two things there this is a very interesting story, helping people understand environmental toxin. Dahlia, you brought up just products, and James, you said hormone disrupting chemicals. For instance, a company that I work closely with in regards to clean beauty told a story about lipstick, and they were making and formulating a lipstick. It was just about to go out on the market, and they had to halt, the sale because there were hormone disrupting chemicals that they found, and they could not figure out why, because they already had good packaging. There was nothing with packaging that was leaching, etc. They thought that they were sourcing responsibly. They were sourcing these rosebud petals out of Europe, and they were organic. It was an organic rose farm, and they had to end up going to the farm and literally going into the field, trying to figure out what was going on. And it ended up that the rosebud petals were being put into plastic bags. And the plastic bags were leaching into the organic rose petals.
Wow.
and tainted the lipstick. So it just shows the power of, that chain and how it all just.
And we don't think about this too, because you can get the best high quality, whatever it is, rosebuds or cacao or whatever, but then you're putting it in the cheapest plastic bag you can find. And this plastic leaches. And then you think about, okay, it has to be grown and then packaged and then shipped and then stored. And then, so it's this whole process before it actually gets to you that it has time for this plastic to leach and contaminate.
And how many companies do their due diligence like that? That story is incredible. And it's
incredible. Yeah. Not many at all. And I don't want to say that story to scare people, or, we don't want to be talking about well, if you're getting this organic juice and it's in a plastic bottle, is that horrible? This is to bring awareness to people so that they can do the things that they can control right in their life. And then the other things that maybe they aren't aware of, we can hopefully balance that out with our health. And then also, if you guys, as our listeners, haven't heard of or watched Seaspiracy to learn more about microplastics in food, especially in fish, you should watch that. So, all right, let's move on past. I was going to talk about artificial dyes and flavors, but that kind of all falls within the environmental toxin thing. So something that I think we could all agree on to avoid at all costs. Okay, now let's get into gut health. So I know that you guys talk a lot about gut health, and this is very generalized, but what would an ideal good gut eating pattern look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So, so like a good gut eating pattern, really, I know the USDA has My Plate. We give you serving sizes, but if you're confused with that, that's overwhelming. We kind of always say, just add plants wherever you can. And I'll kind of let Dahlia take it from there, but
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say right now, the US, we're not necessarily on that trajectory. And we know that we're talking about things that are more up here with these environmental pollutants. And oftentimes people say oh, you guys are, that's discouraging people, that's looking too much into it, but not really. When we talk about the dose makes the poison, we're eating these in abundance. We know that about 60% of the American diet comes from processed food. That's over half. We know that the average American eats more than their total body weight in meat per year. We know that only about 10% of calories are currently coming from fiber. So that is on the exact contrary of what we want to be doing. We want to flip it the other way. We should be getting 60% of our calories from plants, unprocessed foods. We should be focusing on predominantly plant proteins that aren't going to come with all of those PCBs and all of those environmental pollutants. So we always say with our patients, let's not even talk about what we're going to be cutting out. Let's just upgrade. I'm all about upgrading. It makes it sound fun. It makes it sound more enticing. I'm all about helping people upgrade. So I always say, how can we make greens over grains in a meal where, okay, you were having a sandwich, let's maybe lettuce wrap it. Let's add some greens to that. Let's maybe upgrade one of the pieces of bread or the buns. Let's, instead of, a burger, let's get it as a bowl. Let's try to upgrade and add more plants. And, the amazing Dr. B always references the American Gut Project study that showed that those with the most diverse, robust gut microbiome consumed at least 30 different types of plants per week. The average American is getting nowhere near that, right? Only about 3% of Americans are hitting their already low fiber goals. So between 25 and 30 grams, not too much fiber there, but we're struggling to get there. So our goal and our mission and our purpose in our career and in our lives is to really try to help people not only add more plants, but tolerate them better. Because gut health always comes down to not just what you eat, but what you can absorb from what you eat. And so often we hear the health story of a person who says, yada, yada, I was C-section delivery, I wasn't breastfed, took tons of antibiotics growing up, I ate a standard American diet, I was always sick, my gut health was in disarray. And then I tried to go plant-based and I can't tolerate those foods. That is our mission. We always want to say, okay, you are here. You want to eat these plants. Let's help you tolerate them better. What can we do to help you slowly, gradually increase the amount of fiber that you're eating? Because sometimes people go cold turkey. They think, okay, I'm going to completely switch my microbiome from a standard American microbiome where my microbes have acclimated to breaking down that large amount of processed meat, that large amount of dairy, processed food. And now I'm going to go raw vegan, right? Your microbiome needs that time to adjust. We need to be able to shift that. And James likes to give this analogy often. And so he'll share that and then I'll keep going.
Yeah. Well, no, but what I was going to say before that is this is important context to give, because an easy answer to that question is, for us, like 75% of your plate should be plants, right? Like that's an easy answer. If we had to give an ideal, at least 75% of your plate should be plants, and that's fruits and vegetables and nuts and grains and seeds and beans, peas, lentils, all of that. So you have a lot to choose from. But like the context Dahlia is giving is, someone might be like, oh, I have IBS, or like I've just been on keto for 6 months or 6 years. And the thought of me eating 75+% of all these plant foods is just going to wreck my gut, right? So that is such important context. And the analogy is kind of going back to our ancestors. So if we go back 1,000 years, or not even, we can even go back just a couple of hundred years, really. I mean, for someone to eat like an Alaskan Eskimo, which is more keto, versus an Ethiopian, which is more plant-based, they would have to travel that distance to eat that, right? You're talking about maybe your whole life spent traveling. And as you travel, you go through different terrain and you are eating slowly and slowly changing your gut microbiome to adjust to that environment, right? So now fast forward to now, 2021, you can Instacart, you can Uber Eats, you can, just easily order out Thai food, keto food, vegan food, and just shift from one day to the next. And that's where some of this gut confusion is coming from. That's where your microbiome is going like, whoa, what's going on here? Even just with the speed in which we eat. So there's a reason why we cut and chop and prep and cook. We smell those foods. We are preparing the gastric juices, the enzymes, the gallbladder, the hormones. We're preparing. When none of that happens and you're shifting from one diet to the next, you are setting up a perfect storm to just have a bad time. essentially.
And that's often the story with my patients. They come to me and they're like, I want to eat these foods. They just clearly don't want me to be eating them. And so we come up with a plan and we come up with a journey for them adding fiber. Let's go low and slow with the number of grams of fiber you're consuming. And even with a low number of grams of fiber, let's try to break it down. Let's do things like cook the fiber. Let's blend it. Let's freeze it. Let's try to combine those different modalities so that way you're not going from one piece of broccoli a day to a huge raw salad. And yes, you will. You feel like a puffed up balloon, like you're going to just blow up and fly away. So that is so important. And that gives really important context to understanding it's normal at first to feel a little bit bloated when you start eating plants, and going low and slow, and it will subside.
I love that. Hey friend, before we get too far into this episode, I want to be sure you know about how the environment plays a role on your overall health. For over a decade, I've been learning so much about the lack of health regulation in the personal care and food industries. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started this show. You deserve to know how to protect you and your family from unwanted body burden. And I share further information about how to make better choices and vote with your dollar in our private Facebook community called The Urban Pharmacy. On that note, I want to let you know about one of the easiest ways that we've switched to safer, and that's through my favorite clean beauty brand called Beauty Counter. Your skin is your largest organ, and what you put on it every day matters a lot. And with a low carbon footprint, cruelty-free formulations, and high-performing results, I haven't found a better beauty brand than Beauty Counter in over 5 years of working with this mission-driven brand. To learn more and shop clean, head to mybetterbeauty.com. So, okay. Speaking of bloat, that's my next question, you guys. Now, this is different than just after a meal being bloated. What about the people that start off like not bloated, but at the end of the day are like looking like they're pregnant?
Yes, absolutely. And that is such a common story that we hear. So there could be different things going on with that. When my patients do tell me by the end of the night, I am significantly and severely bloated. One thing I'm always first trying to rule out is, are you constipated? And many patients tell me, no, I'm not. I have a bowel movement every day. You can still be constipated and go poop every day, right? Your body is forcing through, and this is oftentimes when patients say, oh yeah, I have a bowel movement, it's loose. Your body is literally forcing water through your colon so it can try to wash that poop out, and you might be having a little bit of almost diarrhea or loose stool. So you can still be constipated. My first thing is always saying, are you constipated? If you're constipated, why are you constipated? Let's try to help you get better flow in your bowels. And if we've done all that and my patients still say, yes, I wake up with a flat stomach and I feel fine, but right when I start drinking water or eating even one bite of food, my bloat onsets. And throughout the day, I become more and more bloated. After dinner, by the end of the night, I look and feel 6 months pregnant. Well, then we're thinking about other things. I might be thinking, is it small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or small intestinal microbial overgrowth, where they might have an overabundance, a large amount of bacteria or fungus or archaea or any of these other microbes that are migrating. So James mentioned in the beginning, right? Everything's connected, mouth to anus. It should flow like a river. And with a river is flowing smoothly. And so we're eating, we're digesting this food. It starts in your mouth. So that's where you want to start. You want to chew your food well, you swallow it, passes through your stomach to get broken apart with stomach acid, goes to our small intestine so we can start digesting and absorbing an abundance of nutrients. Whatever doesn't get digested and absorbed, like certain types of fibers or resistant starch, they'll go to the colon, our large intestine. And so we're not just going to get rid of them straight off. We're going to try to glean nutrients. And so we ferment those leftovers, and that's a good thing. And yes, of course, when we ferment things, you produce gas. So it's normal to pass gas. That's always a question I get. Is it normal to pass gas? Yes. So you might produce gas, and then you produce these amazing beneficial byproducts called short chain fatty acids. These are meant to help with amazing things. First of all, our gut is creating 20 to 30% of our energy for the day. They can help do things like bring down cholesterol, bring down blood sugar, repair the lining of the gut. So when all is flowing well, all that's happening, start to finish, things are moving well. But when my patients are giving me that health story and they're saying, I'm so bloated by the end of the night, and I might have diarrhea, constipation, I might have alternating diarrhea and constipation. And this isn't your average bloating. This is, our patients send us pictures. You would think they were pregnant, or they say, my clothing size changes by the end of the day. I don't fit in the same size pants. I have to unbutton my pants or wear loose clothes. That again could be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So some of those amazing abundant microbes in the colon, where we have about, in one drop or 1 milliliter of colonic fluid, you have about 1 trillion microbes, right? So you have an abundance of microbes. In the small intestine, there's only about 10,000 microbes per milliliter of fluid. So there's not a lot there. But when these abundant microbes are traveling up, they're coming up to the small intestine, they're doing their right job in the wrong place. So they're not bad. It's not like you have an infection. It's, they migrated up and now they're like, ooh, undigested food to ferment. Right when you start eating, right when you start drinking, they're doing their thing, they're fermenting. But when that's happening in the small intestine, that bloat onsets and it feels stuck and it's painful and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll kind of, and this connects perfectly to what we were talking about earlier, again, that river, that ecosystem, right? Because with that ecosystem, if you do have tires, if your river is polluted, that's an oversimplification, but that could be why some of the water is pooling and going back up where it shouldn't, right? If a bunch of tires and trash is blocking your river, you're pulling the water, now it's starting to flood. And just like in an ecosystem, what happens when your house floods or your area around you, your community floods? You get critters that you don't want. You're getting lots of frogs, and maybe you start to get roaches and water bugs and all this because they like that moisture. You start to get mold in your home, right? So when that happens, you start to get things that are normal in the environment just in the wrong place, like Dahlia mentioned. So that is important context to have.
So what is your guys' first, I know it's going to be so individual because everybody's gut microbiome is so different, and it's like a fingerprint, right? But like, what is your first way to tackle a situation like that? Is it going to be like soluble or insoluble fiber supplements? Like what are you looking at there?
With SIBO, one, you want to try to identify what you have. So
this is like walking your river, right? First, like survey and identify, right?
So you want to get tested, either work with a gastroenterologist, and if they have the resources, they can do a small bowel aspirate. They sample some of that fluid in your small intestine to see if there's fungus or bacteria in excess growing there. Or for those who don't have access to that, there's an at-home breath test kit. Yes, there is room for user error. And so it's not 100% perfect, but for a lot of my patients, it's what's available. So oftentimes we'll use that to figure out, is there SIBO there? And then we will try to low and slow retolerate fiber. So we came up with a 7-step program to help people low and slow retolerate fiber as we're working with them and their care team to try to eradicate the excess of whatever it is. If it's fungus, if it's bacteria, if it's another type of microbe that's overabundant in their small bowel, you do really want to move it out. And you want to make sure that the river is flowing properly. So like James was saying, if there's something clogging up the river, mucking up the river, let's get things flowing again. So many of our patients are having low or dysmotility. So things are just not moving well. And that is going to then cause it to come back. Because I do also see the patient who says, I know I've had SIBO multiple times. I've taken the antibiotics multiple times. I am plant-based, or I eat predominantly plant-based, and it keeps coming back. Well, then we want to figure out why. What's going on? Why don't you have great motility? And how can we figure out how to get better motility going? And that can be a multi-step approach. Oftentimes with my patients, we'll figure out, oh, maybe they have scar tissue or adhesions. Let's work with an amazing physical therapist or massage therapist who understands visceral manipulation therapy. Let's loosen up some of that scar tissue that might be causing a backup in your gut river. Let's see, maybe you have pelvic floor dysfunction. I see this often with my moms, especially sometimes childbirth is traumatic to our pelvic floor, or bearing a baby puts a lot of weight and pressure on our pelvic floor muscles that surround our intestines, surround our bladder and our rectum. Maybe that's why. Let's hook you up with a great physical therapist who understands pelvic floor therapy. Is it something going on with the metabolism? Is there something else going on that's really preventing thorough, smooth flow?
So these are all roots to the tree, right? So this is where it is very like we say, yeah, we all look like fingers, but as you move closer, you'll see, oh wow, we have unique fingerprints, and that's our root system, right? That's who we are. But it's exploring these, it's exploring that river and assessing, what do you need? What is this therapy going to look like?
Because it's unlikely somebody is antimicrobial deficient or antibiotic deficient, and that's why their SIBO keeps coming back.
Yeah, traditional treatment is take multiple courses of antibiotics and you'll be fine. And it's like, well, are you? And it's like, no.
And sometimes they might be needed. But
Yeah.
let's figure out why it's happening, because the studies say at least 60% of those treated with SIBO will relapse. That's a high number. And again, oftentimes because they're not working with that interdisciplinary team to figure out why. Is it trauma? You know, we've been talking about trauma. Oftentimes my patients who've lived through traumas have gut issues. We know that trauma is abundant in those who suffer and live with gut issues. So might we hook you up with a great counselor, psychologist, therapist? Is that going to be an important member of your team as you work with, you know, a dietitian, a nutritionist, others who are well-versed in this?
Got it. Okay. Thank you guys. All right. So what about dairy impacts on gut microbiome? I know that's super, it could be super simplistic answer or super long-winded answer, but like top 2 reasons why not to consume it.
I love this. Okay, so you can go about this so many different ways, but with a gut focus, I always ask the question of what is dairy, right? Because we call it dairy, or we think of it as cheese, or we call it milk, but let's like just get right to it. What is it? It's breast milk, right? Dairy is breast milk. So what is the function of breast milk? Well, it's to feed the baby. More importantly, it's actually a medium to transfer. So it's like a vehicle, right? It's a spaceship, right? We are sending microbes to the baby. Now, if you're not a baby calf, should you be getting these microbes? Should you be getting these hormones? Should you be getting these nutrients from the big bovine mother that is not your species? So the short answer is no, you shouldn't, right? And it's like, and quite honestly, and quite frankly, if you are drinking cow's milk, you're better off drinking human breast milk. Like I would rather you be eating, like if we took human breast milk and made cheese out of it, and if that grosses you out, if you're listening to this or watching that and that grosses you out, that is much better than eating and consuming another species breast milk. And mind you, this is done in factory farming settings. This is done in horrible settings where the USDA knows there's a certain amount of pus and blood and microbes and hair and even other animal feces like rat droppings and things like that you are going to get in these foods, and we allow a certain percent of those concentrations to be there. So that sounds better to you. It's more of just like reframing this. It's like we just need a reality check around this and going, look, we don't want to transfer another species microbiome into ours. So the only time you should be drinking milk is when you're a baby, and you can drink milk up to 6 years old. You can breastfeed your child up to 6 years old. I mean, that's what we've been doing throughout our human history. And that's enough time. That's really all you need. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have.
Well, I mean, me from a gut standpoint too, milk is high in milk sugar called lactose, and lactose is highly fermentable. So when my patients come to me and my patients say, I'm bloated, one of the first things that comes out of my mouth is, let's avoid dairy. Let's try to stop fermenting that milk sugar. Not only is dairy high in milk sugar, because again, baby calves and babies need lots of carbohydrates, which we as adults who are mostly sedentary, we don't need that amount of carbohydrate coming from a fluid that we're having. Right. And secondarily, for the gut, dairy is high in saturated fat. We know, and we've seen in study after study, that saturated fat can disrupt the lining of our beautiful intestine, so of our entire gut, the lining can be disrupted. The mucus layer can be disrupted by saturated fat. And so nowadays, everyone's talking about leaky gut and talking about taking 14,000 supplements for their leaky gut. Let's focus on avoiding dairy and eating more fiber for leaky gut. And let's not drink the breast milk of another species.
And that's why you stop us, because we can keep going. But like this one more thing, I mean, with that fat, so breast milk is a lot of fat. We talked about mothers, even humans, having toxins in our body. Most of these, so they're endocrine disrupting chemicals is one layer of this, but the bigger umbrella is what we call POPs. They're called persistent organic pollutants, and those encompass endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so these persistent organic pollutants a lot of the time are very lipophilic. So they love fat. They love to bind to fat. And where are we going to find fat? In milk, right? In butter, in cheese. So you are very, very likely to get these toxins. And if we as humans living in cleaner environments, right? I think we'd all agree we live in cleaner environments than a dairy cow. So imagine what the dairy cow is being exposed to. Imagine the water the dairy cow is drinking. Imagine the feed the dairy cow is drinking. We've driven by dairy farms here in Southern California. There's Chino, which is called Chino, which is a city which has a big dairy farm. They're usually right by the freeway. They're usually right by the runoff of the nearby creek. And so what are they being exposed to? We know they're being exposed to heavy amounts of pollution. These are going to be lipophilic chemicals that bind to their fat, and then we eat the fat. This goes back to what I said earlier, 95% of our dioxin exposure is from that dairy cow, is from that milk. So why would you drink something that's super high risk, highly contaminated, and does nothing for your gut health? And you don't even need to drink it. It's just crazy.
Amazing reasons. I hope that helped bring light for people. There are so many reasons to think about reducing or eliminating dairy from the diet.
Yeah.
Okay, so just one more thing on gut. This will be hard for you guys probably to be short on. Thoughts on probiotics for both adults and children?
Yeah, this is
love it.
Time.
No, we love this.
We just did a podcast last week and we talked all about probiotics for kids and should they be taking them. So short answer, no. Short answer, not really. In the last couple of years, some incredible studies came out and they actually showed that probiotics can at times hinder healthy species of bacteria and other microbes from populating your gut. If you think about it, most probiotics, you'll turn it around. There's like 5 to 10 strains of different types of probiotics, but there's a lot of them. And people are always drawn to that, like, ooh, more is better always, right? And so like, we'll go for the one that has 500 billion colony forming units. So you're getting 5 strains and you're getting that much of them. So you're moving in quite a large abundance of a few things into your gut when it should be the other way around. You should be moving in an abundance of variety, maybe in smaller amounts. And that's really how our gut is going to thrive, with thousands of strains of microbes and bacteria in our gut. So the average person should not be taking a probiotic. And I always get this from those who are like, well, I don't have time to change my diet. So what probiotic should I take? I'm not going to give you that answer. You should really just focus on getting prebiotics in your diet and avoiding that. And as far as kids, we know we get that question too. Should my kid take probiotics? Same answer. Not necessarily, no. We know that there are very few instances, maybe if mom was not able to have a vaginal delivery, baby was C-section and not swabbed with mom's vaginal bacteria. Mom was unable to breastfeed, and so baby got formula, and baby is struggling to build their microbiome. Perhaps a very short course of probiotics may be indicated. And I'm not even saying, yes, everyone do this. Maybe. But usually, no. There are very, very few cases. The American College of Gastroenterology has outlined that very few cases. One is a necrotizing enterocolitis, which is a very severe infection for babies. Something called pouchitis, again, inflammation of the intestines. Very few cases where you're going to require that. Only if you've had a severe gut infection like C. difficile or one of these other severe infections will I say, yes, let's give you some probiotics. Usually, no. Focus on either getting some of those live cultures and foods that have had strains added, and hopefully they've survived, and focus on feeding your own healthy gut microbes with fiber.
And so this is a call to action. I love this question because it says, if you hear nothing else in this episode, in this podcast, hear this call to action. This is, if you are a child of looking to, or, I'm sorry, not a child, a mother or a woman looking to have a child, right? You're in that childbearing age, or maybe you want to get pregnant, maybe you're trying to get pregnant. This is your call to action to really just nurture and love your gut microbiome, because you are going to be passing that on to your offspring, right? This is your gift. This is a gift. I mean, when you think about it, it is an ancient inheritance that has been passed on from your mother's, right? It's been passed on since the beginning of your lineage, of your family, right? Women, I mean, men, we can pass on a little bit as well, but it's mainly the mothers who are passing on this amazing microbiome to your children. So it starts with your microbiome. And so with the microbiome, its structure and its population. The structure comes from what you eat and what you do, and the population then follows. So when it comes to supplementation, you're getting a lot of the population, like Dahlia mentioned, but if you don't have the structure, you're in trouble. It would be, another analogy I use for this is, it would be like taking the population of New York City and trying to put them into a small rural town in Ohio or something, right? It'll work maybe for like a day or two, but very soon it's going to be overwhelming. The sewer systems are overrun. No one, or a lot of people, don't have anywhere to live. There's not enough jobs, and they're all going to leave. So that's what you're doing. You cannot rush the microbiome to grow. It's going to do its own thing. So another big call to action is breastfeeding. Even if you can only breastfeed for a couple of hours and get that colostrum, or if it's a couple of days, do it. Human milk oligosaccharides, HMOs, is what you're feeding your child's gut microbiome through the breast milk and through the colostrum. Again, if it's a day or more, great. I mean, do it as long as you can, ideally, but even if it's a day, do it, please. That is a huge, huge gift. No amount of cryptocurrency or billions of dollars or whatever will equate to colostrum for your baby. That is huge.
Got it. Yeah. So important. Okay. So let's shift a little bit, you guys. Dahlia, I am someone who experiences hypothyroidism and was diagnosed shortly after going off of the birth control pill that I was on for 15 years. I would love to know a little bit more about what message you might have for those who are impacted by thyroid issues, both acutely and via an autoimmune condition.
This is a great question. And it's interesting because there are many factors that can influence the thyroid, and I'll just speak to a few of them. But one, we know autoimmunity is one, which there's gut involvement with. Oftentimes there is that interaction of the gut and substrates moving through the gut, or our food and other viruses flowing through our gut, that then come into contact with our immune system that trigger some type of autoimmunity. So autoimmune can be a driver for hypothyroid. We know nutrient deficiencies. So we're always working with our patients and those who we come in contact with ensuring there's no nutrient deficiency there. Stress is a huge one. And then hormones, other hormones are going to affect your thyroid because your thyroid produces hormones. So it's possible, like you mentioned, that getting off of birth control might have possibly triggered things, or maybe while on birth control, it was being masked a little bit. When other hormones shift, it can cause a shift in the thyroid. So when all of a sudden off of birth control, things are moving and trying to rebalance their equilibrium, it can trigger possibly some hypothyroidism. So tips would be to make sure you're on point with the other things. You're not nutrient deficient. We're always recommending to those who are plant-based, be very diligent in how you are nourishing your body. You know, you're not going to necessarily thrive on a high processed junk food vegan diet. You're depleting your body of nutrients. So get in those whole foods. If you need to take a supplement, take a supplement. There are certain nutrients that also are important for the thyroid and for the gut concomitantly. So vitamin D, B vitamins, zinc, magnesium. Selenium is one also that's important for both the gut and the thyroid. So make sure you're not nutrient deficient. Double down on that. Try to do your best to reduce your stress. And I'm saying that to you guys, I'm listening to it myself. Try your best to reduce your stress. Stress also is not only going to impact the gut. When we're stressed, we shunt less blood to our gut. We produce less mucus to protect our gut lining. But stress also puts us in that fight or flight. We're not in rest and digest, feed and breathe. Our hormones do not function optimally under circumstances of stress, including our thyroid. Do your best to reduce your stress. And then do your best to nourish your gut health. As I was mentioning, there is linkage between autoimmune conditions and the gut. We're starting to come out with more and more research on this. So do your best and try to find that equilibrium. In cases of autoimmunity like mine, I think for a lot of people, it can be difficult. And we know that in general, hypothyroidism is going to affect women disproportionately. I think they estimate that at least 90% of hypothyroid cases are found in women. And a majority of them tend to be autoimmune. And so for my autoimmune patients, one, it's try to catch it early. We know there is a genetic component. So if you know that you're genetically susceptible to Hashimoto's, mention that to your care team. Ask to get tested for thyroid antibodies every couple of years. We know also, again, that diet is important with autoimmunity. And for a lot of my patients with hypothyroid, they will want to avoid taking medication. And it depends on the person. If it's not a severe case, or if they are autoimmune, but they don't have a very high number of antibodies, or there hasn't been a lot of damage done to their thyroid. Sometimes it's possible. I've had many patients who have thrived. It's not always possible, and it wasn't possible for me. And I really had to swallow that pill figuratively and literally. Yeah. I worked with my care team, and I was motivated to get off of my medication. I said, I'm healthy. I'm, walking the walk, talking the talk. I don't want to take thyroid medication. So we worked to wean me off. I felt awful. And, I had to just really come to the realization of my thyroid was severely damaged. My antibodies were so high, they were off the charts. They were over 3,500 when I was first diagnosed. And so I had to come to the realization and have that talk with myself and say, look, a type 1 diabetic wouldn't be trying to talk themselves out of using their insulin. So if you need it, that is why we are blessed to have both Western medicine and Eastern medicine. And that's why we're so obsessed with melding the two and picking the best of both worlds.
And this is coming from a realization of we severely abused our bodies. Like if you were talking to us 15 years ago, not even maybe like 12 to 15 years ago, binge drinking, staying up late, eating horribly. I mean, so when you damage your body, there is irreparable damage that can happen. And it happens to many of us. And so you have to deal with those consequences. And like Dahlia said, come to terms with like, man, I damaged my body and I have to deal with it now. So,
but I'm happy to say I take, like I said, only about 10% of the amount of medication that I required when I was in the still abusive cycle with my body.
Totally.
But that would be my recommendation. Get your gut right. Try to reduce your stress as much as possible and try to balance the rest of your hormones.
Okay. So you guys are like masters at this gut thing, and the gut does have so much to do with the thyroid. And like you were saying, not were we just damaging our bodies, which I was right there with you guys. Like we were debilitating our gut. Yes. And, like that is going to just kind of ruin a lot of things when it goes to the rest of our body and, how that functions optimally. So that is something that I am very aware of that I did as well. I mean, the nights of drinking and then going through the fast food. I mean, like, oh my word, I am so sorry. Gut microbiome. I feel just so bad for you. Okay. Last question on thyroid, and then we will start to wrap this up. Dahlia, what do you think about just in general, herbs like ashwagandha and adaptogens?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always those who are on both sides, and we follow both sides because we want to learn from both sides. So, those who are very, very, very Western are always going to say, well, there's no double-blind placebo-controlled trial to say ashwagandha can be helpful for the thyroid. But there are some studies, again, who's going to fund an amazing study like that on ashwagandha? There have been smaller studies that have shown benefit of using adaptogens like rhodiola, schisandra, ashwagandha for the thyroid. Like I mentioned, stress is a component of the thyroid. So if using some of those adaptogenic herbs helps you maintain your peace and decrease your stress, well, then guess what? It's going to help your thyroid. So I've personally used them in my personal past with, my care team's blessing. I have sometimes, worked with my patients. I've told them, ask your care team if this is something that you can try yourself, but I'm all about it. I think we have a lot of amazing plant medicine that's available out there, and it's asking the right person and making sure that it's in the right combination, but I'm all for it. I'm a big fan of adaptogens. I drink them in teas and
two things to add to that. It's important to realize that we have yet to discover all the nutrition components in food, right?
Many.
So that is important context. There's still a lot of science and research to be done. So to say definitively, no, that doesn't help, or there's no studies on this, or the term we hate, the science is settled on this. So we haven't even discovered everything there is in food, number one. Number two, at least from what we know, the phytonutrients we know, that can be split up into two sections, where there's a cellular antioxidant effect, where we're looking at our human cells and going, oh, this phytonutrient from blueberries or cauliflower or tomato has this antioxidant effect in our cell. Great. What about the antioxidant effect on our microbes, which are outside of our cells? Now we're getting into that research where maybe there are phytonutrients, there are phytonutrients that have antioxidant effects on our microbes. So it protects the good microbes that we want in our gut, and it gets rid of the microbes we don't want in our gut. And that's coming from phytonutrients. That's coming from herbs. And that's coming from the food we eat. It comes from spices. It comes from roots. It comes from many different places, mushroom and fungi that we eat. So it's very interesting. We have yet to catalog all of these and organize all of this, let alone do research to see how they impact disease. So it blows my mind, and there's so much to be done. But
yeah, there really is. Oh my gosh, such a good point. Yeah, showing what is happening to the cells, but not the microbes. That's crazy. And we could, wow. Okay. So that's kind of mind blowing. You got me thinking a lot there. All right. Tell me more about your guys' clinic, and can people across the nation work with you for dietary or lifestyle? What do you guys offer?
Yeah, so our practice is called Married to Health. We are a telehealth practice. So we don't have a physical location. We work remotely. And so we're based personally out of Southern California, but there are over 30 states in the United States where we are licensed or able to see patients. And so those in the US can work with us. Internationally, we really can work with anybody. So if somebody outside of the US would like to work with us, they absolutely can. We offer one-on-one support where, again, my first question, just like you asked us to my patients, is tell me your health story. I want to hear it all. And so we work one-on-one. And then we also have a group for those who have worked with us. So we have a Good Gut membership, and it's a group that's available online. We have our clients enroll in that. And so in that, we share in community. We share cooking recipes of, here is a broken down fiber recipe if you're trying to tolerate more fiber. We'll share our thoughts on different topics like dairy, adaptogens, some of the things we talked about, gut health for kids. So we're really grateful for that. And then we're going to be releasing a couple of ebooks later this year and have some other exciting things down the pipeline coming.
So that group gets all of our stuff for free, like all of our ebooks. It goes deeper. Like if you're like, where is James getting all these studies on antioxidants and PCBs and dioxins? So we share all that in the group for those who want to take a deeper dive. And so it's really just that additional support, because we'll see patients and then they're sending us a bunch of messages through the patient portal. And it's like, sounds like you need more support in between our visits. Let's get you plugged into the group and just get you into that nurturing community where it's all about you taking action. It's all about you learning and growing and just being a healthier you. So all that information can be found at marriedtohealth.com. On Instagram too. If you guys are on Instagram, Married to Health.
Instagram, YouTube, Facebook.
Yeah.
And you guys have an amazing podcast, no?
We don't.
We don't, but we've been told we need to. So that's
I thought you did. I thought you did. Well, see, maybe I was just manifesting that for you guys.
Right.
Okay. So last, I promise this is the last thing. Okay, let's go to James first.
Yeah.
James, what does living a holistic lifestyle mean to you, or a holistic life?
Yeah. So really, I mean, it really comes to the understanding that we're all connected. I think for me, if you can really grasp that and empathize with that and understand, and I don't just mean humans, right? I don't just mean like, oh, she's my sister and that's my brother and all our humans, we're all connected. I mean, even beyond to the earthworms in your backyard, to the soil in your backyard, to the bird flying, we are all connected. We are sharing microbes. Every breath you breathe, you are breathing at least 10 fungal spores that maybe a bird just exhaled, right? We're all connected. So when you understand that, you are understanding what living that holistic life really, really is. So that's what it means for me.
Wow.
How could I follow that? I would say kind of along the same lines. It's really being intentional with your actions, mind, body, spirit, no matter what that concerns. If that's how you look at your diet and the way that you choose to nourish your body and your family, incorporating mind, body, spirit practices in your exercise or your movement of your body and your mental health, just really intending, I think, to leave every situation better than how you found it, whether that's how you interact with others, how you interact, like James said, with our earth, with our food, with our kids. That's such a big one, to interact with our kids, empower them to just be holistically well-rounded and healthy, not just in body, but again, in mind and in spirit.
Oh man, you guys. Oh, such good ones. Okay. Thank you, my friends, so much for your time. Can't wait to get this episode out. Be well and take care.
Thank you so much.
I'm over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of The Urban Pharmacy. For today's show notes, head on over to theurbanpharmacy.com and be sure to join us inside our private Facebook group called The Urban Pharmacy, where we share inspiration, live trainings, and holistic living tips to help you build community and the healthy lifestyle that you've always wanted. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Before we connect again on the next show, follow me on Instagram at The Urban Pharmacy. That's urban with an H and pharmacy with an F. And I can't wait to hear your wellness journey as we get to know each other better. You know, there's truly no better time than now to level up your life. And I am so proud of you for showing up today. Until next time, be well, Health Crusader.